Have you ever wondered why some women leave a lasting impact on a man, making him feel an uncontrollable sense of missing her even when she's not around? It's not about grand gestures or constant attention, it's about attitudes that create emotional space and depth, drawing from Carl Jung's psychology. Jung explained that certain auras emerge from individuation, the process of facing your shadow, the hidden insecurities or past pains, and integrating them into a whole self. Only a small percentage of people achieve this, and for women, it often involves abstinence from chasing validation or filling every moment with contact. Stoic philosophy, like Marcus Aurelius's teaching on controlling your responses rather than external events, complements this, while modern self-worth psychology shows how such attitudes heal trauma bonds, those cycles of dependency that keep relationships unbalanced. From a third-person perspective, women who embody these attitudes often display a rare self-sufficiency that men find magnetic. Jung's concept of the anima, the inner feminine archetype in men, seeks completion, but when a woman is whole on her own, it triggers a deep longing. This isn't manipulation, it's the result of shadow work, where she's confronted her fears of being alone or unworthy. Stoic Epictetus emphasized focusing on what's within your control, your mindset, and this self-sufficiency creates an aura that makes absence feel profound. Psychologically, it disrupts trauma patterns where women might have learned to overgive to feel needed. Their presence lingers because it's not forced, it's earned through emotional freedom. Turning to you directly, have you ever felt the pressure to text or call just to keep a connection alive, only to sense it weakening the bond? That's a common trap, but the first attitude that sparks this uncontrollable missing is embracing your independence without apology. Jung saw independence as balancing the animus, the inner masculine energy that drives assertiveness, allowing you to stand firm. For you, this might mean noticing the urge to reach out during silence and choosing to hold back, reflecting on why absence feels threatening. Abstinence from filling that space lets him feel the gap, stirring his own shadow, his unmet needs. Stoic Seneca advised conserving your energy for what matters, and this attitude builds a quiet power that makes your absence echo. This leads to the second attitude, maintaining mystery through selective sharing. Jung described the collective unconscious as holding archetypes like the enigmatic woman, who draws others by not revealing everything at once. Women with this attitude share thoughtfully, having abstained from oversharing to seek closeness. Modern trauma research shows how constant disclosure can stem from fears of abandonment, but holding back creates intrigue. Have you poured out your thoughts too soon, only to feel the connection fade? That's the shadow of vulnerability misused. Reflect on that. Abstinence from full disclosure invites him to wonder, making your presence more valued when it's there. The third attitude builds on this, prioritizing your own growth over the relationship's pace. Jung's individuation process isn't rushed, it's a personal journey where you integrate your shadow without depending on another for completion. These women focus inward, abstaining from slowing down for someone else's comfort. Stoic Aurelius wrote of living according to your own nature, and this creates a pull. He misses the woman who's evolving, not waiting. For you, this might mean pursuing a hobby or goal, noticing the temptation to pause for him. That reflection highlights your shadow of self-sacrifice, abstinence from it amplifies your aura. In archetypal terms, these attitudes challenge the collective unconscious's image of the dependent partner, replacing it with the empowered self. Psychologically, they address projections, when he projects his insecurities onto you as distant or uninterested. Jung saw projections as displaced shadows, and by holding these attitudes, you reflect them back without absorbing. Have you felt blamed for creating space? That's often his animus reacting, fearing loss. Abstinence from defending yourself lets the dynamic shift, deepening his missing. The fourth attitude is emotional steadiness, responding calmly rather than reacting. Jung linked volatility to an unbalanced anima/animus, but integration brings calm. Women with this attitude abstain from emotional ups and downs, creating a stability he craves. Epictetus taught that peace comes from inner control, and this makes absence feel like a void. For you, notice when anger rises, reflect on its root. Abstinence from escalation builds this steadiness, making him long for your calm presence. These attitudes, independence, mystery, growth priority, and steadiness, create an aura that lingers. They illuminate challenges like trauma bonds, where intermittent closeness keeps you hooked. Jung would say it's the shadow replaying old patterns, abstinence breaks it. Their power lies in self-focus, making any man feel that uncontrollable missing. As this aura of independence and steadiness takes hold, it evolves into a fifth attitude that amplifies its effect, the practice of honoring your own boundaries without compromise. Jung's individuation process highlights the importance of defining the self, integrating the shadow of people-pleasing that often sacrifices personal limits for others' approval. Women who embody this attitude set clear boundaries, having abstained from the habit of overgiving to maintain harmony. Stoic Seneca taught that guarding your time and energy is a form of self-respect, and modern trauma psychology links firm boundaries to healing codependency, where past wounds made saying no feel unsafe. Their aura feels like a respectful distance, sparking a longing in men who sense the strength behind it. In third-person analysis, this boundary setting contrasts with the collective unconscious's archetype of the accommodating woman, always adjusting to please. These women have faced their shadow, turning self-sacrifice into self-assertion through reflection. Psychologically, this attitude disrupts projections where a man might see their limits as rejection, reflecting his own discomfort with autonomy. Their presence lingers because it's rooted in self-worth, not neediness, making absence a powerful statement. Have you ever said yes when you wanted to say no, later feeling drained? That's the shadow of obligation, and abstinence from it builds this boundary strength. Turning to you directly, have you felt that guilt when you assert a limit, maybe declining a request from someone close, worrying it might push them away? That guilt often stems from a past where your needs were dismissed, teaching you to prioritize others. The woman with this aura feels that pull and stands firm, reflecting on why her boundary matters without backtracking. Jung would see this as the animus, the inner masculine, claiming its space with confidence. Stoic Epictetus urged focusing on what's yours to control, your choices, and this clarity reinforces her stance. For you, this might mean saying no to an extra favor, noticing the discomfort rise. Abstinence from over-accommodating deepens this attitude, making your aura a magnet for respect. This boundary setting ties to a sixth attitude, cultivating a life rich with purpose beyond the relationship. Jung's individuation process emphasizes a personal journey, where you integrate your shadow by pursuing what fulfills you, not just what serves a partner. These women invest in their passions, work, hobbies, or growth, having abstained from making a man the center of their world. Stoic Marcus Aurelius wrote of living according to your own virtue, and psychology shows this purpose boosts self-esteem, healing trauma where identity hinged on others. In archetypal terms, they embody the independent creator, not the dependent follower, drawing from the collective unconscious with individuality. Have you sidelined your goals to keep a connection alive, feeling unfulfilled? That's the shadow of self-loss, and abstinence from it ignites this purpose. For you, this might mean carving out time for a project, noticing the urge to check in with him instead. That reflection reveals your growth edge. His missing grows as he senses your vibrant life, making your aura stand out. This presence also faces projections, particularly when a man projects his fear of losing control onto your boundaries as coldness. Jung saw projections as the unconscious avoiding its shadow, and women with this attitude abstain from taking it personally. Stoic philosophy, with Aurelius's focus on others' actions as their own, supports this insight. For you, this might mean him reacting to your space with frustration, reflect on his need. Abstinence from explaining preserves your peace, deepening the longing he feels. Trauma bonds, with their pull toward over-involvement, also weaken here. Modern psychology describes how these bonds thrive on blurred boundaries, mirroring unresolved shadow conflicts. Have you stayed entangled, fearing solitude if you step back? That's the bond, echoing archetypal patterns. Women with this aura abstain from that fusion, grounding in their traits. Stoic Epictetus urged rational detachment, and reflection breaks the cycle, inviting freedom. The fear of solitude surfaces too, often projected as abandonment by others. Jung linked this to the shadow of isolation, a collective unconscious theme. These women embrace solitude as strength, not loss. Seneca found it a space for clarity, and psychology ties it to self-reliance. For you, this might mean him misreading your purpose as distance, his animus projecting fear. Abstinence from justifying turns it into power, enhancing their aura's allure. As boundaries and purpose interweave, they address these challenges. Projections fade with insight, trauma bonds weaken with reflection, solitude becomes empowerment. The aura grows, making him feel that uncontrollable missing. As this aura of boundaries and purpose strengthens, it flows into a seventh attitude that heightens its impact, the art of emotional resilience in the face of conflict. Jung's shadow work reveals that resilience emerges when we integrate the parts of ourselves that fear rejection or failure, a key aspect of individuation. Women with this attitude face disagreements without crumbling, having abstained from the need to avoid tension at all costs. Stoic Marcus Aurelius taught that challenges test our character, not our worth, and modern trauma psychology links this resilience to healing, breaking cycles where conflict triggered old wounds of abandonment. Their aura feels like a steady rock, stirring a deep missing in men who notice its unshakable quality. In third-person analysis, this resilience contrasts with the collective unconscious's archetype of the peacemaker, always smoothing over disputes to maintain connection. These women have confronted their shadow, turning vulnerability into strength through reflection. Psychologically, this attitude counters projections where a man might see their calm as indifference, reflecting his own discomfort with confrontation. Their presence lingers because it's rooted in self-assurance, not avoidance, making absence a powerful pull. Have you ever backed down from a disagreement, fearing it would end a relationship, only to feel diminished? That's the shadow of avoidance, and abstinence from it builds this resilience. Turning to you directly, have you felt that knot in your stomach during an argument, pushing you to apologize or retreat just to restore peace? That reaction often comes from a past where conflict meant loss, maybe from a critical parent or unstable home. The woman with this aura feels that tension and stands steady, reflecting on her stance without yielding. Jung would see this as the anima finding balance, embracing conflict as growth. Stoic Epictetus urged controlling your response, not the situation, and this clarity holds her ground. For you, this might mean pausing during a dispute, noticing the urge to give in. Abstinence from overcompromising strengthens this resilience, making your aura a source of admiration. This resilience connects to an eighth attitude, the practice of valuing your own company over constant connection. Jung's individuation process emphasizes the self as a complete entity, and these women cherish their solitude, having abstained from filling every moment with others' presence. Stoic Seneca found solitude a space for wisdom, and psychology ties this self-value to self-esteem, healing trauma where loneliness felt like failure. In archetypal terms, they embody the sovereign individual, not the needy companion, drawing from the collective unconscious with independence. Have you rushed to fill silence with a call or text, fearing being alone? That's the shadow of dependency, and abstinence from it fosters this self-love. For you, this might mean enjoying a quiet evening, noticing the pull to reach out. That reflection reveals your growth edge. His missing intensifies as he senses your comfort in solitude, making your aura magnetic. This presence also faces projections, especially when a man projects his fear of independence onto your resilience as rejection. Jung saw projections as the unconscious avoiding its shadow, and women with this attitude abstain from taking it on. Stoic philosophy, with Aurelius's focus on others' perceptions as their own, supports this insight. For you, this might mean him misreading your calm as distance, reflect on his need. Abstinence from defending preserves your peace, deepening the longing he feels. Trauma bonds, with their pull toward conflict resolution through surrender, also weaken here. Modern psychology describes how these bonds thrive on emotional entanglement, mirroring unresolved shadow conflicts. Have you stayed in a fight to fix it, fearing the fallout? That's the bond, echoing archetypal patterns. Women with this aura abstain from that cycle, grounding in their traits. Stoic Epictetus urged rational detachment, and reflection breaks the hold, inviting freedom. The fear of solitude surfaces too, often projected as coldness by others. Jung linked this to the shadow of isolation, a collective unconscious theme. These women embrace solitude as strength, not withdrawal. Seneca found it a space for clarity, and psychology ties it to self-reliance. For you, this might mean him seeing your self-value as aloofness, his animus projecting fear. Abstinence from justifying turns it into power, enhancing their aura's allure. As resilience and self-value interweave, they address these challenges. Projections fade with insight, trauma bonds weaken with reflection, solitude becomes empowerment. The aura grows, making him feel that uncontrollable missing. As resilience and self-value become pillars of your presence, they pave the way for a ninth attitude that intensifies the pull, the commitment to authentic self-expression without filtering for approval. Jung's shadow work shows that authenticity blooms when we integrate the parts we hide, opinions, desires, or quirks, that society might judge. Women with this attitude speak their truth openly, having abstained from self-censorship to fit expectations. Stoic Marcus Aurelius taught living by your own principles, not others' views, and modern self-worth psychology links unfiltered expression to confidence, healing trauma where silence was learned for safety. Their aura feels vibrant and real, creating a void in men who miss that honesty when it's gone. In third-person analysis, this self-expression contrasts with the collective unconscious's archetype of the agreeable companion, always tempering her words to maintain harmony. These women have confronted their shadow, turning restraint into freedom through reflection. Psychologically, this attitude disrupts projections where a man might see their candor as confrontation, reflecting his own discomfort with vulnerability. Their presence lingers because it's rooted in genuineness, not performance, making absence a stark reminder of what's missing. Have you ever held back your thoughts in a conversation, fearing backlash, only to feel inauthentic later? That's the shadow of suppression, and abstinence from it builds this bold expression. Turning to you directly, have you felt that hesitation to share your real feelings, maybe softening a disagreement to avoid tension, worrying it might drive him away? That caution often stems from a past where your voice was dismissed or punished. The woman with this attitude notices that fear and chooses honesty, reflecting on why her truth matters without diluting it. Jung would see this as the anima claiming her space, balancing openness with strength. Stoic Epictetus urged speaking from reason, not fear, and this clarity reinforces her stance. For you, this might mean voicing a need clearly, noticing the anxiety rise. Abstinence from filtering frees this expression, making your aura a draw for deeper connection. This expression ties to a 10th attitude, the embrace of emotional sovereignty, where you own your feelings without expecting him to manage them. Jung's individuation process emphasizes the self as independent, integrating the shadow of dependency that seeks external soothing. These women handle their emotions internally, having abstained from outsourcing comfort to feel secure. Stoic Aurelius wrote of mastering your inner world, and psychology shows this sovereignty boosts resilience, healing trauma where feelings were invalidated. In archetypal terms, they embody the self-contained wise woman, not the needy seeker, drawing from the collective unconscious with poise. Have you leaned on someone to ease your mood, feeling incomplete alone? That's the shadow of reliance, and abstinence from it fosters this sovereignty. For you, this might mean processing a tough day without immediately sharing, noticing the urge to seek his input. That reflection reveals your growth edge. His missing grows as he senses your self-sufficiency, making your aura unforgettable. This presence also confronts projections, particularly when a man projects his fear of emotional independence onto your sovereignty as detachment. Jung saw projections as the unconscious avoiding its shadow, and women with this attitude abstain from taking it on. Stoic philosophy, with Aurelius's focus on others' perceptions as their own, supports this insight. For you, this might mean him misreading your self-handling as emotional unavailability. Reflect on his need. Abstinence from defending preserves your peace, deepening the longing he feels. Trauma bonds, with their pull toward shared emotional management, also weaken here. Modern psychology describes how these bonds thrive on mutual dependency, mirroring unresolved shadow conflicts. Have you stayed entangled, relying on each other for mood regulation? That's the bond, echoing archetypal patterns. Women with this attitude abstain from that fusion, grounding in their traits. Stoic Epictetus urged rational self-reliance, and reflection breaks the cycle, inviting freedom. The fear of solitude surfaces too, often projected as emotional coldness by others. Jung linked this to the shadow of isolation, a collective unconscious theme. These women embrace solitude as self-care, not abandonment. Seneca found it a space for clarity, and psychology ties it to self-mastery. For you, this might mean him seeing your sovereignty as distance, his animus projecting fear. Abstinence from justifying turns it into strength, enhancing their aura's allure. As expression and sovereignty interweave, they address these challenges. Projections fade with insight, trauma bonds weaken with reflection, solitude becomes empowerment. The aura culminates, making him feel that uncontrollable missing. As these attitudes culminate in an aura that leaves a lasting imprint, they also equip you to handle the deeper emotional layers that arise in relationships, particularly when his missing turns into a test of your resolve. The interplay of self-expression and sovereignty often brings up projections, those unconscious displacements where he might cast his own insecurities onto your attitudes as too distant or demanding. Jung explained projections as the mind's way of avoiding its shadow, and women who hold these attitudes recognize this without absorbing it. Stoic Epictetus taught that others' words reflect their own state, not your truth, and modern trauma psychology shows how seeing projections clearly prevents you from reverting to old patterns of self-doubt. Their aura remains strong because they've abstained from internalizing every reaction, turning potential conflict into insight. From a third-person perspective, women with these attitudes often face a man's projections as he grapples with the space they've created. The collective unconscious holds archetypes like the ideal woman who is always available, and when you break that mold, it stirs his animus, the inner masculine that seeks control. This isn't about him, it's his shadow surfacing, fearing loss or inadequacy. Psychologically, this dynamic highlights trauma bonds, where his intermittent pursuit, warmth after distance, hooks your nervous system. But these women abstain from chasing that cycle, reflecting on how their attitudes reveal his unresolved issues. Their presence feels even more compelling in absence, as he confronts the void without her filling it. Turning to you directly, have you ever noticed his mood shift when you express yourself freely or hold your sovereignty, perhaps accusing you of being cold? That accusation often stems from his shadow, projecting his fear of emotional independence onto your strength. Jung would say it's his anima seeking an idealized partner who doesn't challenge him. The woman with these attitudes feels that sting and pauses, reflecting on the projection without defending or retreating. Stoic Aurelius advised viewing such moments as opportunities to practice virtue, staying true to your path. For you, this might mean hearing the criticism and noticing your urge to soften your stance. Abstinence from that softening preserves your integrity, deepening his sense of missing the real you. This resilience against projections ties to addressing trauma bonds more deeply, those sticky attachments that replay old hurts through emotional push-pull. Modern psychology describes how these bonds form from inconsistent validation, making his missing feel like a hook rather than genuine longing. Jung saw this as the shadow replaying archetypal patterns of pursuit and withdrawal. Women with these attitudes abstain from engaging in the drama, grounding in their self-worth to observe the cycle. Stoic Seneca emphasized enduring discomfort for growth, and this reflection breaks the bond's hold. Have you found yourself responding to his sudden affection after silence, hoping it means change? That's the bond at play, and abstinence from that hope invites clarity, making your attitudes a path to freedom. The fear of solitude also intensifies here, often amplified by his projections of abandonment when you prioritize yourself. Jung linked this fear to the collective unconscious's archetype of the isolated figure, a shadow that society reinforces through expectations of constant availability. These women embrace solitude as a space for recharge, having abstained from viewing it as rejection. Stoic Epictetus found solitude a test of inner control, and psychology ties it to building self-reliance, countering trauma where alone time felt like punishment. For you, this might mean his messages during your quiet time triggering guilt. Reflect on why. That's your shadow surfacing, and abstinence from immediate response transforms solitude into strength, heightening his uncontrollable missing. These attitudes, self-expression, sovereignty, resilience, interweave to navigate these challenges, turning projections into mirrors, trauma bonds into lessons, and solitude into empowerment. As you hold them, your aura becomes a force that not only makes him miss you but invites him to confront his own growth. Deepening this, the attitudes also illuminate how societal pressures shape his reactions, often rooted in the collective unconscious's expectations of women as emotional anchors. Jung described how archetypes like the nurturing mother influence men's anima, leading them to expect you to manage their feelings. When your attitudes create space, it disrupts this, stirring his shadow, his unintegrated fears of inadequacy. Women with these attitudes abstain from filling that role, reflecting on how it serves neither. Stoic philosophy, with Aurelius's call to live authentically, supports this shift. Psychologically, this challenges trauma bonds where you learn to soothe others to feel secure. Have you absorbed his mood to avoid conflict, only to feel depleted? That's the pattern, and abstinence from it fosters mutual respect. For you, this might mean noticing when he pulls away after you express a boundary, feeling the temptation to chase. Reflect on that, it's his animus reacting to your strength. Abstinence from pursuit lets the missing build naturally, transforming the dynamic. As attitudes deepen, they address fear of solitude as a projected weakness. Jung saw solitude as connecting to the self, yet society labels it loneliness. These women reclaim it, their aura shining brighter in independence. Seneca viewed solitude as wisdom's companion, and this reflection dissolves the fear. As the attitudes of resilience and self-expression deepen their hold, they also illuminate the ways in which a woman's aura can evoke a profound sense of missing, particularly when she embodies the 11th attitude, a steadfast commitment to her own emotional sovereignty without apology. Jung's concept of the self, the integrated core of the psyche, emerges when you claim full ownership of your feelings, integrating the shadow of dependency that might once have led you to seek comfort from others. Women who hold this attitude process their emotions internally, having abstained from the pattern of outsourcing them to feel complete. Stoic Epictetus taught that true freedom comes from managing your inner world independently, and modern trauma psychology links this sovereignty to breaking codependent cycles, where past relationships conditioned you to tie your mood to someone else's validation. Their aura feels like a self-contained force, making a man miss the woman who doesn't need him to regulate her world. From a third-person standpoint, this emotional sovereignty contrasts sharply with the collective unconscious's archetype of the emotionally available woman, always ready to share or soothe to maintain closeness. These women have faced their shadow, turning vulnerability into self-reliance through reflection. Psychologically, this attitude disrupts trauma bonds where emotional entanglement created a false sense of security, fostering a presence that stands alone yet invites genuine connection. Their sovereignty feels empowering, a quiet declaration that draws men back because it highlights what they lack in themselves. Have you ever shared your struggles immediately with a partner, hoping for reassurance, only to feel more dependent? That's the shadow of reliance, and abstinence from it builds this sovereignty. Directly to you, have you felt that compulsion to vent your day's frustrations right away, expecting him to ease the load, fearing you'd be too much otherwise? That need often roots in a wound where your emotions were dismissed or burdened others, teaching you to seek external balance. The woman with this attitude notices that impulse and turns inward, reflecting on her feelings without demanding input. Jung would see this as the anima asserting her wholeness, no longer projecting unmet needs onto a partner. Stoic Aurelius advised enduring your own discomfort to build character, and this self-handling reinforces her independence. For you, this might mean sitting with a tough emotion alone, noticing the urge to reach out. Abstinence from sharing everything fosters this sovereignty, making your aura a compelling mystery that lingers in his mind. This sovereignty naturally leads to a 12th attitude, the embrace of purposeful absence as a form of self-care. Jung's individuation process recognizes that space allows the unconscious to surface, integrating the shadow of clinginess that fears disconnection. These women create intentional distance, having abstained from constant contact to prove their interest. Stoic Seneca viewed time apart as a chance for renewal, and psychology ties this purposeful absence to healthy attachment, healing trauma where proximity equaled safety. In archetypal terms, they embody the wise independent, not the anxious pursuer, drawing from the collective unconscious with measured engagement. Have you filled every gap with messages? Worried silence means loss. That's the shadow of insecurity, and abstinence from it creates this purposeful space. For you, this might mean not initiating contact after a good date, noticing the anxiety build. That reflection uncovers your growth area. His missing amplifies as he confronts the void, realizing your value in the quiet. This presence also confronts projections, especially when a man projects his fear of abandonment onto your sovereignty as emotional unavailability. Jung saw projections as the unconscious avoiding its shadow, and women with this attitude abstain from taking it personally. Stoic philosophy, with Aurelius's focus on others' reactions as their own, supports this clarity. For you, this might mean him accusing you of being guarded. Reflect on his need for constant reassurance. Abstinence from defending preserves your peace, deepening the emotional pull he feels. Trauma bonds, with their cycle of closeness and withdrawal, also lose grip here. Modern psychology describes how these bonds thrive on emotional dependency, mirroring unresolved shadow conflicts. Have you returned to a pattern where his mood dictated yours? That's the bond, echoing archetypal patterns of enmeshment. Women with this attitude abstain from that fusion, grounding in their traits. Stoic Epictetus urged self-reliance in emotions, and reflection breaks the cycle, inviting freedom. The fear of solitude surfaces too, often projected as detachment by others. Jung linked this to the shadow of isolation, a collective unconscious theme. These women embrace solitude as self-nurture, not punishment. Seneca found it a space for insight, and psychology ties it to self-mastery. For you, this might mean him misreading your absence as disinterest, his animus projecting fear. Abstinence from justifying turns it into strength, enhancing their aura's allure. As sovereignty and purposeful absence interweave, they address these challenges. Projections fade with insight, trauma bonds weaken with reflection, solitude becomes empowerment. The attitudes create an aura that evokes uncontrollable missing, rooted in your self-possessed power. Deepening further, these attitudes also highlight how a woman's emotional sovereignty can trigger a man's own shadow work, making the missing not just about her absence but about what she represents, wholeness he hasn't yet achieved. Jung described the anima as a man's inner feminine guide, and when you embody sovereignty, it stirs his unintegrated parts, prompting reflection. Women with these attitudes abstain from rescuing him from that discomfort, allowing the space to work its effect. Stoic Seneca emphasized enduring personal growth, and this dynamic fosters mutual evolution. For you, this might mean noticing his increased efforts after your absence, reflecting on how your attitudes invite his growth without effort. That observation reinforces your power. As attitudes accumulate, they dissolve the fear of solitude as a projected weakness. Jung saw solitude as connecting to the self, yet society labels it loneliness. These women reclaim it, their aura shining brighter in independence. Epictetus viewed solitude as wisdom's companion, and this reflection dissolves the fear. As resilience and self-value become pillars of your presence, they pave the way for an aura that not only evokes missing but also inspires deeper reflection in both you and him. This leads to exploring how these attitudes address the fear of solitude, a challenge that often intensifies when space is created. Jung linked the fear of solitude to the shadow of abandonment, an archetype from the collective unconscious that society reinforces through ideals of constant companionship. Women who embody these attitudes embrace solitude as a space for self-renewal, having abstained from viewing it as a threat to connection. Stoic Seneca found solitude a fertile ground for wisdom, allowing clarity to emerge without distraction, and modern trauma psychology shows how facing this fear builds internal security, healing wounds where alone time felt like rejection. Their aura feels like a self-sustained light, making a man miss the woman who thrives in her own company. From a third-person perspective, this embrace of solitude contrasts with the collective unconscious's archetype of the relational woman, always defined by her ties to others. These women have integrated their shadow, turning the fear of being alone into a source of strength through reflection. Psychologically, this attitude counters projections where a man might see their solitude as emotional withdrawal, reflecting his own discomfort with independence. Their presence lingers because it's not dependent on constant interaction, creating a vacuum that highlights her value. Have you ever filled a quiet moment without reach, worried that silence means the end? That's the shadow of insecurity, and abstinence from that filling transforms solitude into empowerment. Directly to you, have you felt that anxiety creep in during a period of no contact, prompting you to break the silence first, fearing you've been forgotten? That anxiety often roots in a past where solitude equated to isolation or unworthiness. The woman with these attitudes notices that feeling and leans into it, reflecting on how solitude restores her without needing reassurance. Jung would see this as the self asserting its completeness, no longer projecting needs onto a partner. Stoic Epictetus taught that contentment comes from within, not from others' presence. For you, this might mean allowing a day to pass without initiating, noticing the thoughts arise. Abstinence from breaking the quiet deepens this attitude, making your aura a compelling force that stirs his longing. This embrace of solitude ties to a broader understanding of emotional freedom, where you choose connections deliberately rather than from compulsion. Jung's individuation process culminates in this freedom, integrating the shadow to live without the chains of dependency. These women abstain from relationships that demand constant validation, fostering self-sovereignty that feels like an inner anchor. Stoic Aurelius emphasized that true peace arises from aligning with your own nature, and psychology links this freedom to resilient self-worth, countering trauma bonds where fear drove over attachment. In archetypal terms, they embody the empowered self, not the enmeshed lover, drawing from the collective unconscious with autonomy. Have you stayed in touch out of habit, even when it drained you? That's the shadow of obligation, and abstinence from it invites this liberation. For you, this might mean reflecting on a pattern of frequent check-ins, noticing how it stems from past insecurities. That insight uncovers your path to sovereignty. His uncontrollable missing emerges as he senses this freedom, realizing your presence is a choice, not a need. This freedom also confronts projections head-on, especially when a man projects his fear of loss onto your solitude as disinterest. Jung saw projections as the unconscious avoiding its shadow, and women with these attitudes abstain from absorbing them. Stoic philosophy, with Aurelius's call to see others' fears as their own, supports this detachment. For you, this might mean his urgent messages after your silence, reflect on his animus reacting to your strength. Abstinence from immediate response preserves your sovereignty, heightening the emotional pull. Trauma bonds, with their cycle of reassurance and withdrawal, lose their grip here. Modern psychology describes how these bonds thrive on fear-driven contact, mirroring unresolved shadow conflicts. Have you reconnected just to ease the tension, ignoring the pattern? That's the bond, echoing archetypal pursuit. Women with these attitudes abstain from that cycle, grounding in their traits. Stoic Epictetus urged self-mastery, and reflection breaks the hold, inviting true freedom. As attitudes interweave, they foster emotional freedom, self-sovereignty, and inner peace. Abstinence empowers deliberate choices in relationships, where you connect from wholeness, not lack. This rare aura makes any man feel an uncontrollable missing, not through games, but through your empowered self.